right, thank you very much to Tessa. So I think next up we have Dr. Pauline Zardo, who is a postdoctoral research fellow in data and policy here at QUT Law. But her doctoral research actually specialised in public health policy. So today she's going to be talking about open access and the use of research in health policy and practice.
Good afternoon, everybody. Is this?
No, it's fine for me.
Okay.
So.
Good to know. Thank you. I'm going to talk about open access and the use of research in health policy and practice. There's a huge amount of research on what are the barriers to decision makers taking up academic research in health policy and health practice decision-making processes. These are the results of a systematic review published in 2014 that included 145 other studies, 7 of which were previous systematic reviews. So that gives you an idea of the weight of the evidence. And it unequivocally shows that availability and access to research is the key factor that's acting either as a barrier or an enabler to evidence use by health policy practitioners and health policy decision makers. And access is so important because it's a structural higher order barrier. Without access, decision makers in policy or in health practice can't get the research they need to make decisions about assessing the relevance of that research for their particular decision-making requirements, and they can't therefore adapt and apply it. And this was my own experience. I started out my adult career in government and health policy, and I wanted to use research evidence to inform what I was doing. I was willing, I was capable, I'd done honours, but I couldn't access the research. $50 an article. Government departments don't buy subscriptions to journals. We don't have access in government that academics do to research. I explored these themes in my PhD, and I looked at how health policy decision-making in government were experiencing using research in their decision-making processes. And these are some of the things they said. It's fine to talk about a body of evidence, but where is it? How do I look into it? It's sort of the fundamental stuff. If it was easier and quicker to access, it would get used more. We tend to rely on the data a lot, our internal data, where we may not know that academic research could assist. It's about raising the awareness. I think people would definitely be receptive. It's just that, how do they know that it's there and how do they get it in? And as mentioned in Tessa's talk, if people can't access research, including researchers in developing countries who also are at institutions and organisations that can't afford subscriptions, it limits innovation in both research and practice. People are unable to identify if the research that they do have access to is in fact the best research that they could be using at that time. And it's inefficient, so particularly for researchers who are working on solutions to health problems like access to medicines, are unable to identify if the study has been done before, if the particular health program or medicine has actually been found to be ineffective, etc. So it wastes people's time and effort. So I want to give a practitioner perspective, and this is really powerful. I'll read it out in case it's hard for you to see, but I'll come around, but I'll stand near here so the camera guy can still catch me. Yesterday on my internal medicine rotation, I had a patient who developed gastrointestinal bleeding, but was on medications to thin his blood due to heart problems. This is a risky but common medical situation. So I began looking at papers on the topic as the management is very controversial. I found the perfect paper which looked at outcomes of stopping versus continuing blood thinners. I had just been published 1 month ago, and in fact the authors were actual faculty members of my medical school, and yet I was unable to access the article. I was not the only person unable to access it, and my attending physician could not access it, and we lacked the most up-to-date information about how to manage our patient. Either we could stop the blood thinners, which would put them at risk, or we could continue the blood thinners and risk him bleeding into shock. This was not a trivial decision. And this topic is the focus of very active medical research. So why are we forced to wait 12 months or longer until our institution has access to this information? So this is a picture by Hanny Gonzalez-Block about the pathway from health research to practice. And I just wanted to highlight that when we limit access to research, we're actually putting big black holes in that reservoir of knowledge that people out there who are trying to solve real world problems are trying to access to help them make the decisions they need, the right decisions they need to save people's lives. So what is open access exactly? we're talking about peer-reviewed scholarly manuscripts that are freely available via the internet, permitting any user to read, download, copy, distribute, print, search, or use them for any lawful purpose without financial, legal, or technical barriers. That's the definition that's often used. It's very technical for lots of reasons, but this is actually the definition produced by the Directory of Open Access Journals. So all the journals on this directory are fully open access, and if you want to get into the details of fully open access, that's for another time. But you can see there that medical papers are some of the papers that are most accessible in open spaces and most openly accessible research. But despite this, access remains an issue, and the UN Access to Medicine's report highlights this. So whilst a lot of work has already been done, we need to continue to push this envelope further. The UN report on access to medicine highlights that, or has recommendations around, as Tess mentioned, public funders of research must require that knowledge generated from such research be made freely and widely available through publication of peer-reviewed literature, and seek broad online public access to such research. Governments should require that the unidentified data on all completed and discontinued clinical trials be made publicly available in easily searchable public register, regardless of whether the results are positive. And they also made recommendations around more open collaborative processes for research. So using open collaborative research platforms to enable researchers to work together to solve complex challenges, and that governments should require that study designs, protocols, data sets, test results, and anonymity protected patent data be available to the public in a timely and accessible fashion. But there's lots of barriers to open access. That's why we have this problem. So at the moment, journals own copyright to publish articles, and access must be paid for through subscriptions or article processing charges. So at the moment, our academic institutions pay a huge amount of money over to journal publishers so that us as academics can have access to this information. Also, publishers have responded to the open access movement, which threatens their huge profit-making models, and have sought to slow down immediate OA through embargoes. So it's like the practitioner perspective before. Even when they let it out later, you've got to wait a year. There's time periods, so they still withhold that timely accessible to the access to the research. There's also limited incentives from the university point of view and the researcher point of view around researcher performance metrics that are about publishing in high quality journals, not necessarily about publishing openly. And this is linked to national and international performance metrics for university. And for some people, the administrative burden is too high. We're quite lucky here at QUT that we have one of the best repositories that's been established, but for other people in other universities, it can be quite an effort to get their research into these open systems. And there's also cultural issues around that, around people wanting to publish in journals that are known as the best journals in their field and have a lot of prestige associated with them, regardless of whether they're open or not, and they're going to get to the right audiences or not. So internationally, there's been quite a few movements since about 2014 where public funders of research and large research focused organisations are starting to require that research that they're funding be made open access. So the World Health Organization have a policy, the Wellcome Trust also have a policy, and there's a movement called the European Open Data Science Cloud, which is about a broader open access strategy, and that's about open access everything, data, process, publications. It's really, as the Commissioner of the European Data Science Cloud noted, it's a move towards better science, to get more value out of our investment in science and to make research more producible and more transparent. In Australia, we've had quite a bit of recent activity around making open access a priority. The Productivity Commission has made quite a few recommendations around implementing open access policies and increasing data accessibility and data in use. It's really interesting to see these movements at this time, and our largest research funding agencies both have policies. They're both fairly recent, and you'll notice some interesting differences there. So the ARC says metadata must be submitted to an institutional repository, and an article should be submitted. They also say on their website that they're not going to follow it up, and that's up to chief investigators and universities. So it's kind of, do it if you like approach. The NHMRC has a bit of a stronger stance, so they're saying that any publication arising from their funding must be deposited in an open access institutional repository. So that's clearly a much stronger language. So it's really interesting that even though we're getting recognition internationally and nationally in this space, that what an OA policy should look like is differing depending on the organisation that you're coming from. So just to wrap up, access is so important. If we want to increase engagement with health research and increase the impact of health research, it must be accessible. And governments and individual institutions and researchers have a role to play in ensuring that their research is getting to the right audiences and able to solve the complex health problems that are facing us internationally. Thank you. So we're working on topics around this now, so thank you.